curious, where you, first of all, how did that, was there debate about that that you perceived when the film came out, and how do you kind of feel about that in the way it relates to...
Sorry, I'm not sure I know what you're asking me.
I'm asking you, I guess, about...
You mean the reward for violence?
Yeah.
It's an interesting question. It puzzled me for a while. It was even more puzzling because after that, Dave Rook would come round to my house in his car every weekend and say, "Is there any way you'd like to go? I'll give you a lift." He became my chauffeur. It was very sad to me to think that it could be done that way. But it definitely changed the structure of the school. They actually then started a committee to ask the students what should or shouldn't be changed in the rules, why it was so oppressive. And we got a lot of things changed before we left. It's just the old story, though, in the world, that intimidation and violence are usually what tends to create change. And particularly in the 60s, people were talking about Che Guevara and, the Baader-Meinhof and so on. In England, the Angry Brigade. So there was definitely a movement towards the idea of the only way to solve the intransigence of the establishment is violence, that they will not listen to common sense, and they are oblivious to the basic inequities of their system.
Can we open it up to the audience if people have questions or comments or about the film? Or
in '69, and they were talking about what was going on in the schools at that time. What was the reaction in England to it? What was the critical, positive or negative? What did the old school have to say about it? What did the new generation?
Oh, it was thought to be outrageous. Even the tiny little sex scenes were considered to be outrageous. And the establishment, as always in Britain, some of them shouted for it to be banned, of course. And it was never really that well distributed in Britain, for sure. It's a lesser known film. It's a cult film, but it's not a really well-known film. Lindsay went on to do a lot of other films too, many of them satirical, but this is one of the first.
And this is the first in a trilogy with the same character that Malcolm McDowell plays, if people are sort of want to see how that plays out in two following films. There was some...
Yeah, I was wondering if you've ever seen Alan Park's Scum.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if would you think that film's more brutal in its depiction of that world, or do you think it's about the same?
It is just the same. There's always been this underlying system in Britain anyway. We don't know much about in America, but in Britain, this idea that it builds character to be tormented. That if you can break somebody into accepting every kind of discomfort and violence and cruelty, that they will somehow become a stronger person, and thereby, as they say in that film, fight for the empire. And that's why at the end you have the other people rallying around, because they're seen as the positive result of the same system. And of course, it works. It's supposed to build the leaders and the people who change or rule or adjust British society. In a sense, they even did that with me.
Right.
The system did work in a sense, because it made me really clear about my directions and my enemies and what I want to do next. The other thing with that school my school was strange, was that the Queen has been a theme in my work, as you probably know. And she was a sponsor of the school, and when we first went, we were put in a house, not college, ours was called Windsor, and it was supported by the Queen. So we ended up going to the Queen's college, Queen's house in the school, and the church was hers. And since then we've been in an ongoing running battle with the Queen and her privileges. And we've been taken to court for making collages of her and attacking her. But we think it goes right back to there. A sort of resentment of the fact that she was involved in what happened to me.
It just goes right to the top. I mean, the films that I was watching this, and I was thinking of a lot of different films. I was thinking of the Michael Haneke film, The White Ribbon, that just came out. And, there's so much about the kind of, also the fascism of the way that this culture is structured. And I'm wondering, not just sort of beyond the violence aspect, if you might address the kind of the militaristic side of that.
Well, there are schools like that here, aren't there? The military schools. With these schools, they do have, as you saw, they have the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, and you're basically compelled to practice being a soldier for 1 day a week, a full day a week. And you do exercises just like that with weapons, and you are told that if there's another war, you will be officers, and you will be officers and gentlemen, and everyone will look up to you, and you will lead our troops against the enemy. So right from the very beginning, the kids that are only 7 or 8 are being told that you are going to go and fight for the country and be a patriot. And our school was renowned for sending lots of people to Sandhurst, which is like your West Point, and producing generals and Air Force commanders and so on. It was a seeding ground for officers and that kind of person. So
represented in the public schools, but it's happening elsewhere.
That's an interesting point. I mean, basically, the whole film is a description of the failed values of a previous system and its desperate attempt to maintain itself by falling back on tradition and not accepting, not seeing, and not believing that change is inevitable. And in that sense, that would make sense, because, of course, my school, we had 4 Africans out of 800 students, the McQueeners, and they were the sons of one of the dictators, high ministers. They were from the embassy in London. They were friends of mine, actually, but they got terrible bullying too, and a lot of really nasty language thrown at them constantly. But interestingly, the eldest one became the head boy, and he was just like those nasty ones there. He basically became one of the white boys, became a white bully, even though he was black. Whereas the other ones were all mischievous and troublemakers. Well,
and just to that point, there was also this strange moment with this kind of African dirge in the middle where he puts this music on the jukebox, and what doesn't come out is some peppy mod song, as you say, but this kind of very strange African song.
Yeah, maybe that's why he uses that music as a reference. That there's that huge change happening in popular culture, so the jukebox represents that.
And there's actually I thought, was watching and thinking about you and your music, there's it's a very strange score, actually, for this kind of a film. It goes all kind of, and especially like when he's doing the gymnastics and the boys first see each other, there's this very kind of music that made me think of you, during
me too, actually. We'd forgotten that bit. Yeah. Yeah, we were thinking that would make a great soundtrack album.
Yeah.
I wonder what else they would do.
Yeah, I was just curious to know, from your, when you left school, did you sort of feel like you had to sort of deprogram yourself, or was it more of sort of an overamping of what you learned?
No, deprogramming for sure. Some of the people here probably know, but we went straight from there to a university, stayed 3 weeks, and then dropped out and started with some other people a commune, sort of weird art performance commune, and then went down to London and joined the Exploding Galaxy, which became Transmedia Exploration. But that was a very, what's the word? It was a really rigorous commune in that you couldn't be the same person you were each day. So, for example, everyone's clothes were in a box in the middle of the floor, and in the morning whoever got up first wore the clothes they wanted, and so on down until the last person got what was left. All the walls were knocked out so that the toilet and the bath and everything were visible to everyone all the time. And you couldn't sleep in any place twice in consecutive nights. You just had a sleeping bag and you had to move around all the time. So the whole place was based on breaking down any form of habit or repetition. And we were there for about 6 months or so, And that was definitely when we broke all the previous conditioning. And that was the next place that was really important in what happened to me and the way that the work has progressed. That was the liberating place.
Just that period right after you were out.
Right after, yeah. And we loved it because we were so constrained before. That to go somewhere that broke every expectation and every idea of what you were or who you were before, gender, name, everything, just broken. And some people had nervous breakdowns in that system, but we flourished. It was amazing to just, and we still use those techniques even now. I mean, in a way, androgyny is part of that. You know, if you're wearing different clothes every day, and it might be male or female that you get that day, you start to learn that you're just whoever you choose to be every day that you wake up. And you can start to explore the idea that nothing is fixed. And through that, it's gone on in a way right through all the work to the point of saying that's really the subject that we're dealing with. That there is no real binary system, there is no male and female. There are just bodies with consciousness, and it's consciousness that is the person. And the body is just, as Timothy Leary said, a way of making the brain mobile. That's not to say that we don't like erotic combinations of bodies, we do. But we don't put them in a place of being a fixed, finite place in evolution. Just in the same way that people have started to discuss the idea of a third gender, or many genders, really, plural genders, and infinite identities, then in a sense what we are now is just one step in our evolution. We are not finished as beings. We are just on the road to becoming something else. And when you realize that everything is malleable and that nothing is fixed, then that is actually an exciting and liberating thing to know rather than something to be afraid of. Some people are scared of absolute freedom.
That makes me think of the title of the film.
If. Yeah.
It just has that greater...
So it goes all the way through, really, the fight against anything being fixed. We used to say, and, ... You know, somebody says, we've got to this point in existence, and what's next? And if is a bit like that too.
Do you identify with or did you identify when watching with the Malcolm McDowell character?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
What besides the kind of the obvious is, I mean, like, I'm trying to formulate a question that's not in my head yet, so I'm going to hold on. Do you, I mean, I sort of had pause for him at moments during the film. You sort of have moments where you're sort of like, well, is he...
He's manipulating people too.
Yeah, and you know, he's not the I felt that at times, in the moment especially when he is shooting all the pictures on the wall, besides that he shoots the Queen, which we feel good about, right? Besides that, but there's other people that he shoots, and he shoots women in the ass, and he shoots other these things. There was a moment where I thought, well, this could go either way. He's sort of almost saying it's not one way or the other.
Isn't he? He's a nihilist.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And when we say we associate with him when it first came out, we did, because we weren't much of a different age, only 19.
Right.
And we just left that system, so of course we were cheering on the rebels. And at school we were one of the people who would tend to motivate other people and push them and say, when in doubt, be extreme, push, and put the plasters and bandages on afterwards. But you can't step back too far and worry too much about the consequences, or nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, at the time, we were empathetic with him.